Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today, Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, agenda session. I now call us to order. Can I get approval? Okay, it's been moved and, can I get a second? Second. It's been moved and properly second. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed is nay. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, let's start with resolutions 7A, please.
A resolution to amend resolution number 29816 to include NCR Corporation, formerly JetPay, as the authorized vendor of merchant services under the ENCO sewer billing services contract, eligible for payment by the city for services rendered.
Seeing no questions, let's move on to 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Information Officer to enter into a blanket agreement with Target Solutions Learning, LLC, for the purpose of training tools and administrative software to be utilized by the Chattanooga Fire Department beginning November 1st, 2019 through October 31st, 2022, to be paid in full at the beginning of the contract period with a total contract value not to exceed $150,000.
Thank you. Now let's move on to 7C, please.
A resolution to amend resolution number 29863 adopted on April 2nd, 2019, adopting new rules of operation for the Chattanooga City Council.
Thank you. Let's move on to 7D, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into an interlocal agreement with WWTA entitled the Environmental and Economic Infrastructure Improvements, E2I2, for mutual beneficial cooperation to reduce the scope and cost of the projects.
Thank you. Let's move on to 7E, please.
A resolution authorizing the approval of change order number 1, final, for Kimley Horn and Associates relative to contract number T17008-101 for professional services associated with transit signal prioritization and accessibility for an increased amount of $650,570 for a revised contract amount not to exceed $1,420,000.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes this part of our agenda session. There are no departmental reports today, so now I would we got Councilman Russell Gilbert.
Chair,
Yes.
on D, on Public Works, is it possible, Dennis, can you say a few words before we up and down on this so that people can know that this is nothing dealing with what our Chip Henderson put in place or want to put in place versus what we got to have? Can you do that for us? Not to now, I'm talking about when we get ready to vote on it this night. Yes. Sure. Or someone in your division. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Now, at this time, I will turn the chair over to Public Safety and Committee Chairman Ken Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. A motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed is nay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, we only have one item we are going to discuss this evening. If you wouldn't mind reading that on 6E, please.
An ordinance to amend the charter of the City of Chattanooga and all acts, ordinances, and other charter provisions amendatory thereof, pursuant to the provisions of Article 11, Section 9 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee, Home Rule Amendment, so as to change the city charter by adding Chapter 5 related to a Police Advisory and Review Committee to Title 13.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So this is an ordinance that has been brought forward by Councilwoman Coonrod and Councilman Gilbert, as I understand, to place an ordinance that we've already passed on the ballot for the people to vote as to make that part of the city charter. I'm going to open at this time a place for questions unless, Mr. Attorney, you have something to state. Since this is being brought by the council, there's not really staff to give testimony on this one. If you don't have anything, I'm just going to open it up to the council if they have questions.
Well, the revisions that are made in here are simply to incorporate in your charter, in Title 13 of the charter, the authority to have a police advisory and review committee. You've already done that by ordinance to the council previously, but this actually puts it in place as part of your charter.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody with questions? Councilman Henderson.
So, there we go.
Oh, you're on.
I was on, okay. Mr. Attorney, and I'll have some questions for you, then probably for Chief Roddy at some point as well. The amendment that we adopted for the Police Review Committee, that whole amendment will be what's voted on if we put it towards the charters, correct?
Well, you've already currently adopted that by ordinance of the city here at this point in time. I think the charter requirement here is to put it more in place firmly because a future council could change that out. If the people vote for a provision for a police advisory committee under state law that is allowed in there, then it would be something that at least would be in place in perpetuity.
So I guess my question is this: are we putting on the ballot, shall we have a police advisory and review committee, or are we putting on the ballot the ordinance? And here's the distinction, I guess, that I'm trying to make, is if we just say, shall we have a police advisory and review committee, then I'm assuming that we could make some changes as needed
Yes, sir.
to that. If we put this ordinance that we passed on the ballot, anything that changes within that ordinance would have to go back to the ballot as well, right? We couldn't make any tweaks to that ordinance once it becomes part of the charter?
The provisions that are included in this charter amendment still give you the ability to adopt procedures and removal of committee members by ordinance. It allows you to make changes to your ordinance, but it just puts in place the establishment of that committee from this point on. It makes sure that there is a committee with certain powers in the code. If the powers of that committee were amended by ordinance, they'd have to comply with the charter.
Okay, so basically it's the question, shall we have a police advisory and review committee?
Yes, sir.
Is basically the question. The ordinance would fill in the blanks
Yes,
after
sir.
that.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I wouldn't mind if Chief Roddy came down and answered a few questions. I've got no objection, so I'm gonna take that as we're good.
He went as slow as he could.
And I'm here.
And I guess, Chief, since we're putting this on the ballot, I'd just kind of like to get your viewpoint. And I know we really don't have this up and running yet. And I would assume, since we would have the ability to tweak it a little bit as we needed to, as we go along, are you good with putting this on the ballot and having this voted on by the citizens?
You asked the important question that I don't know if I was in a position to ask, but I'm glad to hear it asked, is we're still working through what this looks like for our community. So being able to change and adjust to what we find out as the Police Advisory Review Committee becomes active. What do we see might need to be changed in structure or representation or the training that I've asked for, whatever that looks like, excuse me. Yes. If we still have the ability to evolve with what we're trying to build here, then I don't have any issues with it. I guess the question becomes, if it doesn't pass, then what does that conversation look like relative to what does the community want? And do we then get into deeper conversations? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I'm here for any of those conversations, but that would be my only point of curiosity, I guess, is if it doesn't pass in referendum, what does that mean as far as need and expectations of the city?
Okay. And I just want to confirm again, Mr. Attorney, the point I've raised and Chief Roddy's concerns as well, is we can amend this ordinance even once it passes and the ballot.
Yes, sir. The ordinance can be amended.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. So, kind of a similar question as to Councilman Henderson. That question is, first of all, for the city attorney, and I'll come back to you, Chief. So, first meeting's not been held, correct? The board's still going through training.
Yes,
So I guess my question is, and understanding that you want to put in something that another council cannot undo, so to speak, but what's the rush? Is there something, I mean, they haven't even met yet, and we're really wanting to lock this into concrete, understanding that we can change it, Mr. City Attorney, that if we change the ordinance, piggybacking on Councilman Henderson, then that automatically that change is upgraded
the only
into the
requirement.
charter,
The
correct?
only requirement for a charter amendment is it has to be at least 60 days before any election would occur for the city council. Your next election is in March of 2021. So that would be your deadline, at least is 60 days before then. Your provisions for adopting a charter amendment by ordinance could occur, later than right now, but I understood y'all are interested in making sure you've got your charter amendment on the ballot.
Okay, so if a future council can make as many changes as they want to the ordinance,
Well, they can't make as many changes as they might want. They still would have a police advisory committee with police advisory
Okay.
committee powers. There are methods in here to make amendments in the ordinance here. There's still a requirement that that committee is going to have to compile a comprehensive report of activities on an annual basis, and that the police chief is the final decision maker on any discipline of police officers. That is set forth in both the charter and in the code.
okay. So all we're really doing here is putting a police advisory committee into the city charter,
Yes, sir.
period.
Yes, sir. And it would have to, once it's in the charter, the only way the charter amendment works is that if you go through the process and the vote of the electorate changes that, then that's how that would have to occur.
So any changes to it will have to go through the voters.
Yes, if it is in the charter.
Okay. I think that's clear.
Yes.
Okay. We don't have another opportunity to do this before our terms are up, correct? Is that why we're doing this now? To place this on the ballot?
I believe as long as you do it more than 60 days before the election, you can do that as
Okay.
well.
So
Yes.
we have time to see how the committee works, make changes, recommendations, test drive the car, so to speak, before we sign the paperwork. I know that's not lawyer terms for you,
rhetorical.
for Phil, but it's just simple, good old small business terms.
You have more time, yes.
We do have more time. Okay, thank you, Chairman. Chief, I think that's really all. I was just curious of the timeframes, why, I'm really interested to see this work. We had a great meeting with the committee last week, 2 weeks ago, and I'm just really interested to see how this works. I guess before I'm just signing on to lock, stock, and barrel, so to speak. But I'm just trying to figure out if there is a rush to do this right this second, and what that rush, what is the reason behind the rush?
If I may pose a question, is that okay? With it becoming a charter amendment, does it then make the PARC permissible or required? And the reason I ask that is, as of right now, we have 9 members. It takes 5 to make a quorum. And this comes to the test driving the car analogy, sir, is as this progresses and the members that have graciously volunteered to be part of this may encounter personal circumstances, change of heart, change of life, where they live, their address, their employment, whatever that may be, and we lose representation that is enough to form a quorum, how do we handle that? If by charter it's a requirement to have a PARC, but by membership we do not have a quorum to have a PARC, where does that leave us? Does that make sense? I guess that would be a city.
No,
attorney
that's a
person.
great question, Chief. I actually had that written down on my list, so I appreciate you asking that.
Yes, sir.
That
Mr.
becomes a
Attorney?
council issue at that point in time to make sure that you have enough members of your body to be able to do that. And it's a 9-member committee, and there's supposed to be 1 member for each council district. So that would be a requirement for the council to make sure that you are adequately staffed.
And just, again,
Please.
for conversation's sake, the timeline of attending a CPA, 4 ride-alongs, the simulation trainer, and the legal and law class that city attorney and I are going to give the PARC, the current members, upon completion of these other items. If just hypothetical, 5 leave the same day, you're 4 months out from having 5 more to replace them. That's how long, just best case scenario, it would take to hold the training in order to make them functioning members of a PARC. It's just like when a police officer leaves the department. It takes me a year to grow a new one. So it wouldn't be just immediate appointment and the quorum's reached. It would be appointment and 3 to 4 months before that individual has gone through the same level of training that we agreed to for the current members that are going through it. So that's why I'm asking about if it's required or if it's permissible. How do we work through that?
Phil, what is the language on that as far as required or permissible?
The provisions in the code clearly right now say that you have to have a police advisory review committee. The provisions of the charter amendment in here says that the review committee would have the powers of a community oversight board under state law. It would have to be there to ensure timely, fair, and objective review of citizen complaints, protecting individual rights of police officers, and to make recommendations concerning citizen complaints to the chief of police. There is a 9-member body that is required in connection with that. There has to be some sort of qualification for membership of each person that would be on that committee. And it just says all members will be appointed at the discretion of the council members, and the council can adopt procedures for appointment and removal of those individuals by ordinance. So with that provision is up to the council in that regard.
So do we need, Phil, would you think, to answer the chief, would we need some kind of language in the case of lack of quorum, some particular action? And maybe it doesn't, maybe that can be part of the policies and not part of what we're talking about doing today, but.
Yes, I was trying to give you all the ability to do that by ordinance or resolution if you want to do that. And we said that you could adopt procedures for removal of committee members if they're not showing up. So, and I think you have that as far as your normal procedures for committees here in the city. If someone fails to attend 3 meetings in a certain period of time, I believe they can be removed. But however y'all wish.
Okay, but we can do that outside of what we're talking
Yes.
about here.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know that that is a definite answer as far as the language, at least for me, as far as the language in the amendment and what will be in city code. Does it state a police advisory committee will be formed or can be formed, or police advisory committee will have these powers, but it doesn't state that it has to be in existence?
It says that there is created a committee.
Okay, so it is required.
It is required, and it's
that's-
required to have 9 members.
Okay, thank you, sir. I am going to move on to Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you. I think that this is so important that it be done right. So I have a few questions. I totally totally favor the concept. Phil,
Yes.
so you're saying that it has to be the next city election, not the next election, right?
Yes.
So if we pass something today, it doesn't mean anything until 60 days before the city election.
I believe we can have it at the next general election. That may be in November. That would be your earliest date, but November of 2020.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I
Yes.
think it's the next general election,
Yes.
not the next city election. So November
2020.
2020. I think that councilpersons Coonrod and Gilbert have done a fantastic job. I see some possible holes in it right now. So let me ask again, if this goes on the agenda, if this gets passed, it's passed as the current ordinance reads?
Yes.
Because we're still asking questions about the current ordinance, not that it shouldn't be passed, it is passed, but there's too much in there that's firm that may not be what we want, like it shall have 9 members. It doesn't say at least 9 or no fewer than. I mean, there's some wording. I think the chief brings up a very good point. If the citizens should vote it down, does that mean we don't have anything? These are rhetorical. I'm not. So I'm trying to figure out where the holes might be to make sure that this is ironclad and workable. So I have some concerns. Have you picked up on concerns that, because there's nothing that we have, as a matter of fact, nearly a year to work on it, right?
You have a little bit longer, yes.
A little, okay.
Yes.
So I'm very firm that this should happen in the city, and it is happening. I think I would like more time to see where we have glitches. Chief, I still feel some glitches in its freedom to do whatever it does, in its autonomy, some things like that I'm still not sure about. So nothing can happen until this time next year if we were to pass it today, right?
Well, you need to do it at least 60 days. I think your drop dead would be sometime in the summer of this coming year.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilman Gilbert.
Well, to answer some of the question, I think, when it comes for the urgency of putting it on the ballot, as you recall, Councilman Byrd wanted something on that ballot, and he did it way ahead of time, and it still didn't make it. We're trying to make sure that this does make it to the ballot. If we got some tweaks, then you have time to make the tweaks. Does not change anything, because he just said we can make the tweaks, if that's a concern. When it goes to the education part of it, I recall in the meeting that myself and the chief and Mr. Lawyer had that, and matter of fact, even the council, the board asked the same question. You wasn't there to ask the same question to us, is that if we had, you said over 6 months or 5 months, but we also discussed a special class for this group if we have to do it in the meeting. And that's one of the things they're asking for kind of now, is that it would help if we could do something like that.
May I
Go ahead.
respond, sir? The Citizens Police Academy is 9 weeks long, so that 4-month timeline was taking into account a special Citizens Police Academy session just for those members. I couldn't predict what the timeline would be if they were to try to attend a standing session, because it would be dependent upon when the vacancies occurred to when it was there, then plus 9 weeks, then plus ride-alongs, then plus simulator training, then plus the course with myself and the city attorney. So that 3 to 4 month timeline that I gave was based off of a special Citizens Police Academy session just for the park members.
Okay, so you're saying your opinion is that 4 weeks to 5 weeks, that's what you're saying for the special?
No, sir.
If we had to go a special route with them?
No, sir. The Citizens Police Academy would be 9 weeks long. Then the additional time to hold 4 ride-alongs for each member, or excuse me, 3. A simulator training session with each member, and the special block of instruction on government, employment, legal, Loudermill hearings, everything myself and Counselor Noblet are going to put together to teach. All of that compresses down to about a 3 to 4 month timeline to take a new member and have them complete the required blocks of training that we currently require.
Okay. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to push for this to happen soon because of the situation that happened with Councilman Byrd. We don't want to wait. I mean, if you can tweak it, why wait? What's the purpose of waiting if you can tweak it?
You done, Councilman?
Yes.
All right, I'm going
Right
to answer
now.
that question and take
Right.
liberty on that one. What happened with Councilman Byrd's case was a mistake in the city attorney's office. It had nothing to do with the amount of time as to when the ordinance was presented and passed by this body. So doing it sooner doesn't give you that guarantee. It's making sure that what this body passes is actually distributed properly in order to take place.
Can I talk about that?
If you need.
Hmm?
Go ahead.
I understand that, but a mistake can happen again, like it did then. So why should we wait if we can tweak it?
I wasn't saying we should wait, Councilman. I was just clearing up why
Okay.
it didn't happen.
Yeah, I know that part.
Had nothing to do with the time.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Coonrod. Check your light, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I just have to agree with Russell on that. For me, it's more so, it's not urgent, it's just a matter of getting it done in a timely manner. And because before, like he addressed historically, when that opportunity came about with Councilman Byrd, we missed it. It never was placed on the ballot. I understand mistakes happen. No one is perfect, we get that. But we asked time and time again to make sure that it was gonna be placed on the ballot. And Mr. Stillman never received the information, so that means it never went out. Now, if this ordinance is just simply giving us the authority to say we want to have it placed on the ballot, that we want to have the opportunity to make those amendments to the charter, that's what it's saying. Now, we can still, even in the, up until that 60 days, we can still correct it, change whatever wording we need to, remove or add, make sure that the language is exactly how we want it. We still have governance over that portion. This is just saying now that our council, we're in agreement or not, to have the charter amendment changed. That's what that's about. So we still have the opportunity to get everything cleared. Because again, a mishap can happen, and because if we're passing this, we still have the opportunity to make sure that Stillman knows that this needs to be placed on the ballot. We're gonna provide you with the necessary language within them 60 days that you will know that it's gonna be exactly worded how that is. This isn't trying to put in place to be against the police department or anything like that. We've already had, prior to establishing the oversight board, committee review board, the police had an advisory board that wasn't active or as active as the community felt like that it needed to be. And I think this gives our community the opportunity to voice their concern and also have buy-in. Now, if the community decide overall, the city of Chattanooga, that say, hey, well, we decided we don't want this referendum. Well, guess what? We still decided as a council and voted that we're still gonna have an oversight board. So that doesn't determine or change the work that we've already set in stone. This is just, giving us permission to move forward with having it placed on the charter, in our charter. I hope that made sense.
Yep. Good, ma'am. Councilman Henderson, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Phil, if I'm not mistaken, it's a general election or a city election, either
Yes,
one, correct?
Either one.
So we have literally until March of 2021.
If you wish, if you want to have a general election, you could have it in November. Yes, sir.
But I'm saying we have until March of 2021,
Yes, sir.
literally. Okay.
You'd have 60 days from March.
Yeah.
Yes.
I personally, I think I would rather see it passed, putting it on the ballot the way it needs to read or the way it needs to be before we go trying to tweak it. Now, I'll tell you something that I've heard today that that concerns me a little bit, something that the chief brought up, is what happens if we happen to lose 5 people at one time. If I understand, you're saying there is no contingency built into the ordinance that would allow for something different than basically a quorum. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's my understanding.
I think we need to have some kind of contingency built in the event that we happen to lose all 5 at one time. And from what I'm hearing Chief say, at the very least, it's gonna take 9 weeks, correct? Before we could get anybody up and trained. So all I'm saying is I feel like it needs to read and it needs to pass the way it's going to be presented on the ballot. I think that would be a cleaner version. That doesn't mean we can't address that in a week or 2 weeks, and it's just like anything else that we've passed on this council. Sometimes we have to go back to the well, 1 or 2 times before we get it the way it needs to be, before we pass it. And I'm happy to work with I think it needs to be on the ballot, but I think it needs to be the way that we're going to present it before we vote on it up here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Phil, as I'm reading this is an ordinance to amend according to, nowhere does, when you add something in its entirety to the city charter and you pass it now, there is no tweak room. That's a bit misleading, I think, or I don't want to engender any misunderstandings. There is no room. I think this is so important that I would suggest that rather than an ordinance, we have a resolution that says no later than 60 days prior to the date of the next election it could be, and I don't care whether it's November or March, but 60 days prior, let's say, to the November general election, that we shall have in place in order to be voted on an amendment that will change the city charter to include thus and so. If we do it by resolution, then that binds us to it. It binds us to doing it no later than 60 days prior to whatever my colleagues want as an election. I would suggest the November, the soonest election. And I think that it then gives us time. It not only binds us, but it gives us time to tweak however we need to tweak, because it can't happen any sooner than that anyway. But I believe the way this reads now, an ordinance to amend the charter, once we vote on that, we voted on that. And I'm not sure that it's got the tweak room that some people may think we have. And I want us to have all the room we need to get it right without delaying it at all, and the ability to ensure that it gets on the ballot. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Councilman Gilbert, back to you.
Nothing. Since most of my colleagues have some concerns about the timing and having time to do what they want to do, Chair, I would like to put this on July ballot, on July's agenda now, so it'd be already placed on there, so it'll be no if and no ands, no buts, so that we have time to tweak, we have time to vote on it, and have time to get to where it needs to go. Is that all right with you? Yes. All right, thanks.
Done, Councilman. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to also add that between here and then, please send that, your additional, the things that you want to add or you feel like need to be removed out of it, so we can we can dialogue about it or get with our city attorney about it, discuss it before then. So when it comes to that date in July, we've already, been working on it. So when it comes, we're not back having the same conversation we had a year ago, saying we didn't get the ordinance, we didn't get the resolution done, we didn't have any discussion on it, it wasn't placed in committee, and which is foolishness at this point. And so we can make sure that it's on the ballot come November.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Councilman Gilbert? I think it's like there's a delay.
Okay, I got it. That's July the 7th of 2020.
I was just gonna make that recommendation for the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Phil, you got that?
Yes.
All right. Lydia, you got that too, right? All right, we're gonna have multiple people remind us to make sure that this takes place.
There you go.
Okay. Hang on one sec. Councilwoman, hit your light, please. Councilwoman Burrs. There's a second delay, it seems like.
All right.
There you go.
Rather than just merely put on the agenda at request, I would like it to be a resolution that on that date that shall happen.
Okay.
I think that's much more important because agendas can change. I think it should be resolved that no later than whatever the date is, the 7th, than July 7th. It will be on the agenda, and I think that forces us at least 2 weeks before that to make sure we have done all the research and done all the questions and all of that. So I would request that it be put in the form of a resolution.
When do you want to take that?
Phil?
Sponsored
Mr. Chair,
by
do you-
these
Mr.
two
Chair, do you have any
council people.
problem with doing that 2 weeks from tonight? Do you have any problem having that on our agenda 2 weeks from tonight, a resolution as Councilwoman Burrs presented?
Sure.
Phil?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
ma'am. Okay, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair, again. Now, Vice Chairman Henderson, since you voiced so eloquently your concerns about making sure that we have quorum and the people are showing up, will you please get in touch with your appointment and the guy that you appointed to the board and make sure that he's begin to show up at these meetings and get his rides scheduled and make sure he come and be a part of the police academy and introduce himself to the other 8 members that's serving on this wonderful board as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Ledford. Yeah.
Almost
There
hesitate
you go.
to say anything, but I'm going to.
Think about it.
Mr. Chairman, this question is probably for my colleagues. Am I gathering that your intent tonight on item 6E is a withdrawal or a defer to July 7th?
It's next week, so we can move it, miss.
We can
move it, Councilman.
Okay. All right, I was just trying to figure out. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, I see no other lights. So if there is nothing further, we will adjourn the Public Safety Committee and move on to Planning and Zoning Committee with Councilman Ledford.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Planning and Zoning, the most exciting, oh, look at that, I'm ready to jump in there. I like that. Fantastic, thank you. I could tell. A lot of energy. A lot of energy. Come on, Chairman, hang with me. All right, we're going to start off with ordinances. John, 6A.
Yes, sir. This is a request to rezone properties in the Hill City community from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone to accommodate an additional residence on this property. If you zoom in, you can see this property is just south of the Peak Street, Miriam Street intersection. Currently has a house on it, and again, they're seeking to rezone it into R2 to allow for the construction of a second residential unit. If you look at the surrounding land use, you can see these pictures here. Most of the land use here is single-family residential. If you look at the zoning, there are no R2 zones on this block. There is an R2 zone up on the hillside above, but not on this block. You can see, again, the closest R2 zone is up on the ridge side there. We're looking at the land use plan recommendations. The Hill City Northside Land Use Plan adopted in 2003 recommends single-family dwellings with lots as small as 5,000 square feet in this area. So again, it's recommending that urban single-family residential. Staff's assessment that this is not compatible with the land use plan or the surrounding development form would be a precedent setting for this block, so we recommend to deny. Here again is the site plan showing the proposed second residential structure. An interesting footnote on this, to do that, you would also have to, either, they would have to be attached in some way if you're trying to really do this as a duplex in R2. So that's a problem there as well. So Planning Commission, there was no opposition at Planning Commission, but they did support staff's recommendation to deny. So both Planning Commission and staff recommend deny.
Very good. Thank you, John. I do have a light. Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, if you would go back to the map that you had at the very beginning, Hill City Neighborhood Association did meet and took a vote, recommended denial. They've worked very hard to maintain or to make sure that all the residencies, the zoning stayed R1 in this particular location. And that's something that I will be supporting denial. Go on back one more.
One more?
Come on,
There?
right there.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to throw something at Blythe right now. It shows High Ridge Drive running behind this little piece right here. There was actually some debate at this meeting as to the current status of High Ridge Drive. Is it, there's been some debate about, is it an opened alleyway? Is it actually a street, a city street? Could you do some research for me and get back with me and let me know what High Ridge Drive is actually listed as? Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Henderson. I see no other lights, John, so if you'll move to 6B, please.
Yeah, this second item is in North Chattanooga off between Tucker and Tremont. This is a lift conditions request. You may recall this case about a year ago, rezoned to R3MD and RA zone form-based code, and there were some conditions attached to that, including a condition requiring a pedestrian connection between Tucker Street and Tremont. Here you can see the site. Again, we can see where there's some grading done. You can see some trees falling there, but essentially it's still vacant today. And the applicant's requesting to lift that one condition requiring a specific type of pedestrian connection between Tremont and Tucker Street. Here's the zoning map, again, showing you the zoning boundaries. Be mindful, there's an existing right-of-way that runs between the ERA zone and the ERM3 zone, so that's still open. At one time, there's a request to reclose it, but that was withdrawn. So that right-of-way still exists between those two properties today. These are the conditions, which, by the way, these were conditions that were put on at City Council. They were not part of the PC Planning Commission review or staff review when this first came through. I was going to see if Councilman Mitchell might give some additional commentary on that. But essentially, the condition that was added, there's two of them that were added at council. One with the walkway between the alley and Tucker Street, and work with Transportation Department on a plan connection. And the third item you see there's a stamp drawing being provided by a licensed geotech engineer. The applicant is asking to lift that condition noted in red. Here is the site plan that was submitted with that request. You can see they're planning on using that existing right-of-way for vehicular access with rear parking. The plan, the North Shore Land Use Plan adopted in 2007 doesn't have any specific commentary as it relates to connectivity. It did have recommendations for urban medium high density on Tremont Street and urban single family on Tucker. One of the things that we now use as a tool in evaluating potential connections is the people, places, and paths study. Sorry, it's a PPP alliteration there. Anyway, we use it as a tool to kind of assess the potential for pedestrian connections. And looking at this particular site, there is a value add through that analysis to maintain some kind of a pedestrian connection between the two streets. And so that's why our staff recommended to deny the request to lift that condition. So there's some kind of pedestrian connection. I will say I would be open to generalizing that, to maybe look at some various ways that a connection could be had. But I think staff's concern about just lifting that condition outright is a concern. So again, here's the site plan that was submitted with that. There was opposition present at Planning Commission. The opposition was a property owner who owned another parcel just on the other side of that right-of-way. I'm going to go back, I'll show you. If you see that kind of the red triangle, and then there's a long kind of beige color building, and then there's a dark brown right above that, that vacant lot is owned by that person who had some opposition, and their concern was how changes to that condition might affect how they use their property, essentially. I think it was more about wanting to know more information about what that would mean for how they develop their property. So anyway, Planning Commission, after hearing staff's recommendation to deny comments from the applicant and the one opposition, recommended to approve it. I will say that there were at least 2 votes against that approval. So I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Thank you, John. I'm seeing no lights, as I'm sure everyone was wishing Mr. Mitchell was here to weigh in on this one. I do have one question, though. It might be for Blythe. Blythe, the walk path or the connectivity, was that completely within the right-of-way, or does the applicant have to seek any part of ownership? Because I was under the impression that the connectivity that the condition calls for,
Go back to that.
he did not actually own the property to make that commitment happen. I'll give you a second to circulate that one.
Ask the question again, Councilman.
Sure. The right-of-way, the right-of-way between the 2 properties,
Sure.
Is that the proposed connectivity path? They talked about abandoning, but it's not been abandoned. Is that the proposed walkway or connectivity that the city was looking for?
I don't think, I think the answer to that question is about the intention of the condition, and I don't recall the intention of the condition. We would normally not answer that question until we got to a point where they submitted for a building permit and we reviewed what they submitted. I would certainly think that an unopened right-of-way would be an appropriate location for
Connectivity?
a developer to fulfill that condition, but it wouldn't be the only way to do it.
Okay.
So I guess the short answer to your question is I feel like it makes sense to me that alley would be what would be used to fulfill the condition, but I don't think they would have to do
Okay.
that.
So we still have some unanswered questions on this case, I think.
Well, I don't think that's a question that we would answer until they submitted for a building permit, because the condition as written doesn't specify exactly how it's done. It just says that the pedestrian
Understood.
connectivity has to be
Okay.
provided.
All right. I think that helps tremendously.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing no other lights on this particular case. So thank you, Blythe. We're going to move on to 6C, please.
Yes, this is a request in Hickson and Councilman Smith's district. It's a request to rezone an R5 zone property. It's currently vacant to M2, basically for expansion of an existing industrial property to the south. So it's just basically consolidating what's already around it. Here's a zoom in on the site. Here is a picture looking into it off of Adams Road. As you can see, the rest of that purple there represents M2. The rest of the area is zoned M2. This is just bringing that into consistency with the M2 around it. And if you look at the site plan, you can see they're going to be, that's kind of lower right-hand corner of that piece. They're going to be incorporated into the existing development. It's consistent with the plan recommendations for heavy industrial at that location. So staff recommended approval. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. They also concurred with staff's recommendation to approve.
Very good. See no lights. Thumbs up. Thank you there. Thank you, John. Moving on to D.
Okay, this is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to RT zone for a small lot residential development. Essentially, they want to take one lot and divide it into 3 lots. To do that, they need to rezone it to RTZ. This property is located off of Graysville Road, south of East Brainerd Road, on Irish Road. Here's a zoom in of that property. You can see the existing development pattern in the area. Upper left-hand corner, you see the lot in question. You can see some of the surrounding properties. This is probably a better thing to look at. You can see the existing lot pattern, kind of the size of lots. So just look at that and again, imagine dividing that up into 3 lots. There is no zoning history with this, around this location as it relates to RTZ. This is a reminder that zone would allow a density of up to 8 units per acre, has a minimum lot width of 35 feet for single-family detached and 24 feet for townhouse units. The East Brainerd Corridor Plan recommends low-density residential for this location, and that means a density range of 1 to 5 units per acre. As I noted, the requested zone will allow up to 8 units per acre. It does allow for townhouses and duplexes if it's within those density limits and consistent with the character of the area. Not an issue, it's residential. The concern was that the density and the small lot sizes was not consistent with the pattern on that street. Therefore, we recommended to deny. Here, you can see going down to that 47, 48, and 26 feet lots if rezoned to RTZ. So staff recommended to deny. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. However, Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to deny. So they both recommended to deny.
Thank you, John. This is, of course, in my district, and I spoke with the applicant about this, and I'm actually surprised that it's actually on the agenda because I thought there was a different plan coming, but I agree with staff's recommendation, so thank you.
I'll double check with Brian to see if there's any formal communication on that.
All right, thank you very much. That will wrap that up. Let's go with the resolutions. 7C.
Yeah, this is a request. This is in Councilwoman Coonrod's district, north of the Glass Street area. They're requesting a special permit for a retirement home or home for their handicapped or aged persons. Just as a little background, by state law, if it's a private operated facility, there's a requirement for a special permit. If it's nonprofit, it's by right. Since it's operated by a private concern, not a nonprofit, they have to get a special permit. It does limit them to no more than 8 basically beds, residents at one home. Again, you can see here a close look at the property. It's on a residential street. It does it is across from the rear of an existing church, so there is some institutional uses just across the street from here, a church nearby. Here you can see the site on the upper left-hand corner, single-family home. It has a shared drive with parking in the back. As you can see on the lower left-hand corner, that's the back part of the church that this house is across from. The zoning in the area is R1, so again, we're not changing the zone, it's just a special permit for a home for the aged. It was part of a down zoning. It was down zoned to R1 back in 2004 as part of a rezoning study. So just, again, this information just communicates the application requirements for applying for this. And so, again, by state law, if it's for private purposes, they have to get this special permit. The plan recommends, the East Chattanooga Land Use Plan adopted in 2005 recommends single-family dwellings with some exceptions for townhouses, patio homes, and two-family dwellings where it's compatible. Staff felt like the requested use is compatible with the land use plan recommendations and the adjacent land uses. And so we're recommending to approve. Again, here's the site plan showing the facility using that drive for parking and also in the back. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve.
Very good. Thank you, John. Councilwoman Coonrod, are you good? I thought I saw that look, so very good. John, that comes to the end of our committee.
sir.
Sorry, I apologize, everybody. That was so short, but
You do have one more brief.
do we have anything else going on
Just a
tonight that
small
we need
item.
to talk about, John?
Oh, we have actually the airport district plan.
Yep.
I've had my staff here. She's got some stuff to give you an overview of this. This will be coming to you for formal adoption in January. It's going to Planning Commission in December. So she's just going to give you an overview of the plan and its recommendations. Just as a reminder, this is a little different than your typical land use plan. It's really what I'll call a strategic plan, looking at capitalizing on the growth opportunities around the airport. It looks at some potential sites that could be redeveloped that would align with how the airport is growing. So that was the primary driver of this study. And I will say we're already getting some positive feedback from development interests. They're looking at particular sites based on some of the recommendations of the plan, which is a good thing. But Sarah's going to give you an overview of the kind of the overall plan structure, the process, and the recommendations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Cook.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me present on the Airport District Plan. As John mentioned, this district plan is a bit different from our larger area plans, which is our current focus. It's about 2,500 acres, whereas our area plans can be anywhere from 10,000 to 25,000 acres, depending on the planning district it's in. So that's to give you a sense of scale, that a district plan is something that's very zoomed in, focused. It's closer to implementation. And essentially, at this scale, you really have a redevelopment plan. Before we get into the weeds, I do want to mention that the Airport District Plan draft is posted on our website in its entirety. So it's about 188 pages to add to your light reading. So I'm just going to give you the highlights today. I have about 15 minutes. I'll pretty much stick to the script. You do have packets in front of you. And on your left side is a copy of this presentation that's on your screens. And then on the right, when we get into the land use recommendations, you have 11 by 17 handout of that land use plan, just because it's a bit smaller scale on your screen. So I wanted to make sure that you could see that. Okay, so move that out of the way. So why the airport? Well, it is not uncommon, or it is pretty common, for cities that have an airport to have a plan for the land use and for growth and development around their airports. It is seen as a citywide and even a regional asset in some cases. So you see a few examples on your left here. At the very top is Pittsburgh. They feature a research and development campus with advanced manufacturing facilities. And then Charlotte is there in the middle. They have a plan which addresses a commerce district and some retail in the area and corporate business parks. And then the last one there is Denver. Denver, being a bigger city, actually has a multi-district airport city strategic development plan. They have some transit-oriented development. They focused on accommodations, retail, housing, corporations. They sort of have the works in that plan. So this is just to give you some examples of the diversity and the variety that you can see in airport district plans. And there actually is a chapter in here that looks at some other precedent cities that are similar in size and scale to our city. So you can look over that. So getting to our airport, the Chattanooga Metropolitan Airport Authority, we have seen some growth in the past couple of years. So you'll see here on the right that passenger boardings have exceeded 500,000 in 2018. This is a 67% increase in 5 years. And then there's been some recent expansion for corporate airport businesses, including Westar Aviation and Wilson Air Center. And then the airport has completed a master plan for airport facilities, specifically on their property this past spring. So now is a really opportune time, because we do have this growth, to look at our land uses around the airport and strategically see how it can grow. And Councilwoman Burrs and Councilman Gilbert saw the opportunity here and really championed this study being done. And the airport and the mayor's office saw the potential with our airport as well as an economic asset to the city. Okay, so in August of 2018, Council passed a resolution that set forth some objectives for the study. They were to generate recommendations to enhance gateways to and from the airport. These gateways, they could take the form of capital projects, so streetscaping, catalytic site projects, as well as public art. Economic development was a main driver for this study in terms of identifying the economic niche for the airport district. So we were asked to identify opportunities for new development and target economic sectors within close proximity to the airport. So what that means is what types of businesses want to be located near an airport or within the airport economic ecosystem, you could say. Then infrastructure served three key specific functions. The first was to promote economic development. The second was to enhance gateways to and from the airport. And the third was for safety considerations. And then finally, we were asked to conduct a land use process to provide guidance on future growth around the airport and to protect established residential neighborhoods, and there are a few in the area. All right, so we developed this unique plan approach to meet these resolution objectives. First, we did some foundational analysis. We looked at transportation, stormwater, economic, and land use systems. I won't spend too much time talking about our analysis, being that we have limited time, but I do want to point out that we have a pretty robust economics chapter in the plan. We actually had a sub-consultant do a very detailed study of the economics in the airport district. And then we developed a public engagement program. So this consisted of community workshops and stakeholder groups. I have a timeline here for you. In mid-November of 2018, we did a project kickoff, which were 2 community workshops. They were the same workshop. We just wanted to provide residents with 2 different options. And then we held a series of stakeholder meetings. It was pretty intense, but we met with the Midtown Leadership Group, major employers, developers, government officials, government agencies, to name a few, CDOT, CARTA, Public Works, ECD, and TDOT. We also had an advisory team that consisted of the capital planning from the mayor's office, as well as the Chattanooga Metropolitan Airport Authority. And then in mid-March, once we were further along with the document, we held another progress public meeting where we represented some of our analysis and recommendations. And in September, we held an open house wrap-up where we presented the draft plan. Okay, so your public outreach and your foundational analysis really framed our implementation recommendations, or were informed by those. And these are 3-tiered. Essentially, they boil down to land use recommendations, catalytic development site programs, and infrastructure project recommendations. And I'm just going to go through a brief overview of all 3 of those. Okay, so the land use strategy, if you want to pull out your 11 by 17, you can kind of see that maybe a little bit better. But this is really where a lot of our recommendations are nested. So I'm going to start here. What the land use strategy does is it identifies locations for job growth and employer recruitment, for housing options and protection of established residential neighborhoods, as well as catalytic developments. Okay, so let's skip ahead here. All right, so we'll go into what the colors mean a little bit. Oh, but first I want to give you an orientation to where we are. I'm going to use the pointer for me. I know you can't see it, but on the south, you have the overpass over South Chickamauga Creek, and then you have East Brainerd Road veering off to the east, Jubilee Drive that heads north into the airport property, and then Lee Highway continues north to form that eastern boundary of the study. Then you have the Lee Highway 153 interchange and 153, which forms your northeastern boundary. Then you go across Polymer Drive, across the airport property, and you follow South Chickamauga Creek on the west, and you're back to where you started. So that's it. That's about the 2,500 acres. Okay, so now into what all of it means. So So the hatched light blue that you see here, closer to the airport property, this is called our light industrial mix. And the economic analysis pointed to smaller scale industries such as light manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, and avionics as the economic niche for the airport district. Okay, so these areas that are hatched in the blue, closer to the airport, can accommodate those type of land uses. And then you'll also see intermittent throughout here is the yellow, which is the single-family residential. And we heard from residents and participants in the workshop that they really wanted to see their homes and their neighborhoods protected from encroachment, including multifamily. So the policy language supports maintaining those as single-family neighborhoods. Okay, there is some opportunity, however, for some multifamily to support job growth and also a citywide housing need. You'll see that in the hatched orange color there's some off of Shepherd Road, and there's also some off of Airport Road. Currently, these are mobile home parks, which are slightly higher density than single-family residential. So say these properties were to sell and someone wanted to build some lower to moderate scale multifamily, the policy language would support that. Okay, let's see here, what am I missing? Okay, along Leah Highway, you have that green, which stitches together existing uses and the two catalytic sites, which I'm gonna get into a little bit later. Around the highway interchange, you have sort of a light pale red, which is highway commercial. It supports those businesses that need immediate access to that highway. And then on the western boundary here, you see a patch of dark green. This is city-owned property right next to South Chickamauga Creek, and it's essentially maintained and owned for the purpose of flood control in the area. Okay. I think I covered all of that. Okay, and then nested in here, you can see that there's a little bit hints of some illustrative plans that I'll get into in more detail. You can see these are catalytic sites. These are off of Shepherd Road and at the node where Airport Road meets Lee Highway, as well as down by the intersection of Jubilee Drive, Lee Highway, and East Brainerd Road. So essentially, there are three of these catalytic site developments. And these are important because they add a dimension of placemaking to this airport district, and they add a place where people would want to spend time. So you have light manufacturing, warehousing, avionics. Those are all very productive land uses, but they're not necessarily places that you want to go and hang out. So to add that placemaking element, to create those human-scaled, pedestrian-oriented places, we've added these catalytic sites, and it's also to build market confidence in this area. Okay. So the first one I have here is Jubilee Crossing, and this is on the southern part of the boundary. This is at Lee Highway and Jubilee Drive. This one is where you see the least amount of land to be assembled to make this a reality. So it's more, essentially it can be done probably a little bit faster than the other ones, but there's more property that needs to come together to make it happen. It features in the orange there, 150-key hotel room, some retail, food and beverage, and office in the pink, red, and blue. A flex industrial space, essentially flex industrial is office at the front with some light manufacturing towards the back of the site. And then you have this open space here. And this is a stormwater feature as well as a park. It's also something that could serve as an amenity to the hotel. One thing that we heard in the stakeholder meetings is if you're in a flight crew and during your working hours you're cramped up in a plane, if you have a layover or an overnight stay, you want to get out, walk, get some fresh air and some exercise. So this we saw as sort of an important amenity for the hotel. And then nested in these catalytic sites, and this is similar in all three of them, we have these recommended infrastructure projects. And we did this intentionally, marrying those catalytic projects with the infrastructure list, because this is really about spurring that redevelopment. And we've divided them into near-term, midterm, and long-term. So the near term is where the city has the right-of-way to go ahead and implement a project pretty immediately. Our midterm and long-term are slightly more complicated projects in that they may require right-of-way acquisition, a public-private partnership, coordination between CDOT and other departments, such as stormwater, coordination with TDOT. So those types of things make it a little bit more complex to get all the pieces in a row to make that project happen. Okay, I think that sums it up. Okay, then we have Chickamauga Triangle. And this is at the intersection of Airport Road and Lee Highway. And this one we really see more as where you're going to put your mid-rise vertical mixed-use residential, so more ground floor retail, office with residences above. And what this does is it provides more housing options in the district. And also where you have housing, you support those human-scaled, pedestrian-oriented places such as food and beverage and retail, et cetera. So in the near term, we have some intersection improvements that can be done. Again, I just want to note that these are recommendations to inform the capital planning process and the capital budget. They do not guarantee funding. It's a plan to help guide these decisions. And then in the long term, we have some streetscaping along Lee Highway. We don't have the right-of-way there yet. And then we also have Airport Road streetscaping, which we heard a lot from the residents that they would like to see sidewalks along there and also something done with stormwater. Okay. All right, so the last one we have is Level Field Gateway. This is off of Shepherd Road. We see this more as an office type corridor with some neighborhood serving retail, food and beverage, potentially another hotel. There already is a capital project that's being done here, and they are in the bidding phase, so they're looking for a contractor, and once they award a contract, then they will go ahead and start construction. This was actually achieved through a partnership with the airport, who essentially paid for the construction documents, and then the city is funding all of the construction. Okay. So that sums it up. We have, as John mentioned, throughout this process, it has generated some interest from the development community. In terms of assembling land and making these projects, helping them to move forward, the draft plan does recommend I guess it has a few different recommendations. Either you have a division of the airport that assembles land and works with developers. You can also have a community development corporation. But right now, ECD is willing to talk with or speak with interested developers in the airport district area. And I do want to mention, before I open it up for questions, that one of the reasons we know we have a city-wide budget to balance, and that was really a struggle for us, and it definitely came into play here. But ultimately, I think it resulted in this workable solution of near-term, midterm, and long-term projects to help guide infrastructure investments in this area over a 10-year period. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Take a breath, take a break. There you go. All right, relax. I do have a light for you, so you'll be right back here in 2 seconds. Councilwoman Burrs.
On now? Yeah.
There's a delay.
A lot of work went into this, and I was amazed. The more meetings we had, we've already gotten a number of development calls, and property values have started going straight up, much to the chagrin of people that were a little late calling in. RPA's done a great job of doing this study, of getting a lot of input, and I know Councilman Gilbert and I have been to a number of meetings and are excited about the turnaround there. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I was waiting for your light, sir. Councilman Gilbert.
There you go. Thank you. I agree with my colleague. This has been a great journey. Hope to see reality of it. I do appreciate all the work that you have done in that area, and hope to see again the reality of it in the near future. I appreciate it.
Very good. I see no other lights, but I want to congratulate you on a great job. I know this is very exciting for districts 5 and 6, and much needed vision for an area that's very important to our city. So I applaud you for the hard work and look forward to the next steps to improve this area as well as many others in our city. I'm seeing no other lights, no other items. John, do you want to talk about tonight's public hearing for 30 seconds?
Yes, sir. I think the upshot is we want to hear from the public. So
Okay.
staff will have a very short presentation, and I know you've got some opening remarks. And
Yes, sir.
we look forward to all the community feedback. It's part of democracy, is hearing everybody's thoughts to get to a right-sized solution for Chattanooga. So we look forward to starting that journey with you all.
Very good. And with that, I'll see everyone at 6.
You want self-pat down or what I do?